Hello Year 10. Today we're going to be looking at photosynthesis, as the title of the lesson suggests. Some of this will be retrieval practice for you, so you might well know some of this stuff, especially about leaf structure, but it's going to be see what you can remember and then adding new information to your notes. You should have a copy of the advanced organiser for this lesson as well, which you can use to fill in as we go along. So we're going to be looking at the structure of a leaf and its adaptations for its function. We're going to be remembering the equation for photosynthesis, and you'll need to know the word and symbol equation. You'll need to know where the reactants come from, the substrates, and where the products go to, what happens to them, and think about why it's important as well. So the first little activity I want you to do is actually use the advanced organiser and complete as much of it as you can from memory, because you have done some of this stuff that's on that sheet before. So give yourself 5 minutes and pause the video at this point. Okay, so next few slides is going to go over a few things, including leaf structure and then photosynthesis and other things. So you can then, as we pause, we go through, you can add things to your organiser and add to your notes in your exercise books as well. So if we just think about leaf structure, if you actually look at the layer of a leaf, there's actually only sort of a few layers. We've got a layer at the top here, and then which is the waxy cuticle. Then we've got a layer underneath, which is the epidermis. Then we've got a layer here, which is the palisade mesophyll cells, with the cells with lots of chloroplasts in them. Then underneath you've got spongy mesophyll layer with the xylem and phloem in it. And then you've got the lower epidermis, which also has the guard cells and the stomata. Okay, so if you this is a tissue plan, if you like, how you might draw something called a tissue plan, and then you can put the actual diagram underneath it and you can see how it all marries up. So the waxy cuticle will be on top, and then epidermis, etc. So what we need to know is make sure you know what all the functions of different parts are for, so hopefully you manage to match up the correct parts, but we'll just go through that on the next slide. So we've got the waxy cuticle, which prevents water loss. It's a waterproof material. You've then got the upper epidermis, which is actually a transparent layer. Remember, epidermal tissue surrounds the outside of things, so it lets light through to the palisade layer, and its job is actually to secrete the waxy cuticle. It doesn't have any chloroplasts in it, so the light goes through to the next layer, which is the palisade mesophyll, which is where most of the photosynthesis occurs. That's where there's large amounts of chloroplasts with lots of chlorophyll in them. Underneath that you've got your spongy mesophyll. These are more irregularly shaped cells, and we saw that when we were looking at transpiration. This creates the air spaces that are needed for gas exchange, so that gases can diffuse from the air outside the leaf through the stomata, through the air spaces, mainly towards the palisade cells. We think about carbon dioxide, especially for photosynthesis. The xylem vessels, should know that, transport water and minerals upwards. Phloem vessels transport the products of photosynthesis, organic compounds like sucrose, but also amino acids and other things, from the leaf to the rest of the plant, or actually at other times, say from the roots up to the leaves, if you're growing new leaves, maybe in the spring. The lower epidermis is the outer layer on the bottom of the leaf, and there will be guard cells as part of that can control the size of the stomata, so they can affect the rate of gas exchange, which includes affecting the rate and controlling the rate of transpiration. And then the stomata are the holes through which gas exchange occurs. So now you've done that, what I'd like you to do, and I'd like you to do this in your books, is I'd like you to come up with as many ways in which a normal leaf is adapted for photosynthesis and for gas exchange and for transportation. Okay, if you give yourself a little bit of time, let's say 5 minutes just on this, and see what you can come up with. Okay, so hopefully you've come up with adaptations for photosynthesis, which would include having large amounts of chlorophyll and chloroplast in the palisade mesophyll so that it can absorb as much light as possible. Thin leaves, but giving a large surface area, so very big but very thin, so they can absorb as much light as possible, and light doesn't have to travel very far to get through to those chloroplasts. And also having the vascular bundle of veins, which brings up water and minerals obviously, but also supports the leaf so it's facing towards the light. Then you've got adaptations with gas exchange, so having the stomata to allow gases to go in and out from the leaf by diffusion. You've got the spongy mesophyll creating those air spaces for the gas to diffuse to the palisade layer, and also leaves generally quite thin from top to bottom, so the diffusion distances are short. And then transportation, you've got the xylem bringing the water and minerals up from the soil towards the leaf, and you've got the phloem vessels translocating organic solids like sucrose down to the roots from the leaf when the leaves are doing lots of photosynthesis, or towards the fruits, or up from the roots, say, during the spring. So if you've not got those ideas, you might want to pause the video now and just add any more little points that you've got there. Okay, so the next part of the lesson is going to be looking at photosynthesis, making sure you're happy with this and thinking about how it links in to how the plant gets all these materials as well and what happens to them. So there's going to be quite a lot of information on the next slide. So the key thing about photosynthesis is it is a chemical reaction. So it's using light energy to produce organic compounds from inorganic ones. So inorganic ones would be things like carbon dioxide and water, and the organic compounds is the sugars that are made. Okay, so light energy is being transferred into a chemical energy store. Think about your physics. Key thing here, some textbooks talk about producing energy for the plant. You have to be really careful about this. Remember, you can't produce energy. The energy's coming from the sun and it's producing organic compounds in that chemical energy store. So the energy is being just transferred effectively from one store to another in the form of these organic molecules. So try to avoid saying producing energy for the plant, say producing organic compounds which contain the energy. So this is all happening in the chloroplasts within the palisade mesophyll mainly, but also a little bit in the spongy mesophyll. So you've got, this is our chemical formula, this is a chemical reaction. So you've got carbon dioxide and water reacting somehow, and it's not as simple as a single step process, but for GCSE you just need to know this. So carbon dioxide plus water reacts and produces glucose, when you can just remember it's sugar, but this is actually the formula for glucose, or what's called a hexose sugar, 6-carbon sugar, and oxygen. Now, you have to be really careful here. Carbon dioxide is not converted into oxygen. Okay, in fact, the oxygen that's produced comes from water, not from carbon dioxide. So let's think about where all this is happening. So we've got light energy being absorbed by the chlorophyll. So the more chlorophyll you've got, the more chloroplast you've got, the more light energy you can absorb, and that's driving this reaction. So the energy is being absorbed and driving this reaction, so the energy is now mainly in the glucose here. The CO2 is coming from the air, diffusing in via the stomata from the air. The water is going to have come from the soil, and it's going to have travelled up from the soil through the stem in the xylem vessels. The oxygen that's produced is going to generally diffuse out into the air via the stomata. And then the glucose that's produced is going to be used by the plant. So some of it will be converted into starch stores, so it might be translocated down to the roots in the phloem and converted into starch grains, or stored as starch within the leaf. You could test for that using iodine, if you remember, goes blue-black. It can be converted into lipids, so fat, and it can be converted into cellulose. Remember, cellulose is used to make cell walls, so important for growth of the plant. Making these molecules and other things that plant do requires a release of energy. So actually, because this isn't a chemical energy store, some of that energy is going to be released through aerobic respiration to drive other chemical reactions and cell division and everything else. Okay, that would also require oxygen as well, obviously if it's aerobic respiration. You can also convert the glucose into other molecules, so you convert them into proteins and DNA and RNA and hormones and other things like that. So proteins are needed for growth, DNA and RNA will be copied every time, or DNA will be copied every single time a cell needs to divide, so you need to make more of it. Now these molecules here contain more than just carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, so they need other elements, and those elements come from the soil, and the ones you need to know about are nitrate ions and magnesium ions which would be absorbed by active transport in the roots and transported in the xylem, okay, towards the leaf, and then they can be used to make these molecules or to make amino acids, which are translocated to wherever they're needed. That's your key idea. So you need to know these are the fates for glucose. So it could stay as glucose, it's unlikely. It's probably going to be stored or used in some way. All of these reactions here, this reaction here, requires an input of energy, so therefore it's endothermic. Remember, endothermic reactions in chemistry talk about things getting colder, but that's because they're taking energy, heat energy from the environment to make the reaction work. So they're taking in energy. So here it's light energy. Notice what colour of light can be used. Okay, because plants are green, they will reflect or transmit, which means just let straight through green light. So they don't use that, but they can use red and blue wavelengths. So it's really important to remember that as well. So take a few minutes now to add notes to your advanced organiser. You've got quite a bit of space on the right hand side there to put in the formulae, to put in the fates for glucose, or you could just add extra notes into your exercise book. Give yourself 5 minutes on that. Okay, what I'm going to do now, close your book, and I want you to answer the questions below in just 5 minutes. Okay, so once you've done it, check back. Okay, give yourself 5 minutes. Okay, see how you did. Doesn't matter if you couldn't remember it all, but the idea is to keep practicing remembering, not just writing notes. So when you're doing if you've got a bit of spare time, or if you're doing revision, that's a way to help yourself revise. So the next bit of the lesson, I'm just going to talk about gas exchange, which is the last bit really on your worksheet there, thinking about how gases move in and out of the plant at different times of day. So on our amazing drawing I've done here, you've got daytime and nighttime, and we've got a plant here, obviously shown as the tree. So in the daytime, you'll think what gases are going in, what gases are going out. So we're thinking about gas exchange in the leaf here. So in the daytime, you're expecting carbon dioxide to be being taken in and absorbed, and oxygen to be being produced. And the reason for that is you've got photosynthesis going on. So the rate of photosynthesis is greater than the process of aerobic respiration. Remember, respiration is done by all living things all of the time. So during the day, photosynthesis and respiration are occurring, but the rate of photosynthesis is much higher than the rate of respiration. So therefore we've got a net uptake of CO2 and a net production of oxygen. Another gas that will also be being produced is water vapour. Because remember, when the stomata are open during the day, water vapour is going to be diffusing out because it's evaporating. You've got transpiration occurring. Now let's think about what will happen at night time. So at night there's none or very little light. So the key thing here is what's going to happen to photosynthesis. Yeah, there's going to be much less or maybe even none. But respiration is still going on. In fact, the rate of respiration doesn't really change very much from day to night. It might fall a little bit because it tends to be a bit cooler and temperature affects rates of chemical reactions, but generally there's not much difference. So now we've got gas exchange going the other way. Now you notice I've made the arrows smaller because there'll be slightly less of it because the rate of respiration is quite low. So oxygen will be being taken up for aerobic respiration, and carbon dioxide would be given off because we've either got only aerobic respiration because there's no photosynthesis because it's too dark, or the rate of respiration is greater than the very low rate of photosynthesis you might have. And this might be, say, for example, in the very early morning, the rate of photosynthesis might be very low because the light intensity is not very high, just as the sun's coming up. Key thing here is the rate of respiration is pretty much the same. What happens is you change the size of the rate, the speed of photosynthesis. Also at night, it's cooler, stomata tend to close, so there'll be less transpiration going on. Give yourself just a couple of minutes just to add those ideas to your notes or into the worksheet. Okay, last little thing, little plenary activity. Get yourself thinking. Variegated plants are mutant varieties of plants where they have areas of the leaf that have less chlorophyll in them. So you can see these pelargoniums, sometimes we call them geraniums. These are normal ones. These are the variegated ones. You can see much less chlorophyll. There's white areas where there's no chlorophyll at all. It says, explain, using your understanding of photosynthesis and the effects of glucose, how the rate of growth of a variegated plant is likely to differ from a non-variegated plant of the same species. There's 4 marks for this. Give yourself 5 minutes. What can you write in those 5 minutes? Okay, let's have a look at and mark this yourselves. Give yourself a mark out of 4. So, key thing, you'd expect the rate of growth to be lower because, and there's no mark for that, because it's really the explanation we want. There's less chlorophyll in the leaf, so we'll have a lower rate of photosynthesis, and you could put a comment here as well, because less light can be absorbed, and that'd be worth commenting on too. The consequence is less glucose is going to be produced. So you're not making as much biomass. Biomass, remember, is a mass of living things. Okay, so it links into your ecology work you did in year 9 as well. But the key thing is less glucose being made, which means because glucose is used in respiration to release energy for the plant to grow, there's going to be a lower rate of respiration, so less energy released from growth, and also you use that glucose to make things like proteins and cellulose, so you're not going to be able to make new cell walls for new growth, okay, and you're not going to be able to make new proteins for new growth. So see how well you did. Did you get the idea of the lower rate of photosynthesis because less light being absorbed? Did you get less product? Did you make links between what the glucose product is used for and how that links into plant growth? Go back in, mark your work, re-note, write a better answer, have a look at this mark scheme, blank the screen, and have another go at writing the question again. Hopefully you've understood those key ideas, and the next lesson we'll start thinking about factors that affect the rate of photosynthesis. Thank you.